Okay, we're learning the Rebbe's Maamarim of Yud Aleph Nissan. We're on page in Maamarim Lukat Gimel. We're on page Gimel. We started already Eis Gimel. Okay, bottom line so far. It says about Yom Yom, even like we learned yesterday, even though physically all the Nisim brought the same korbanos, but the Medrash says each Nasi was different. So it says Asher is the Inyan of Ashrei, the Inyan of that the Yidden chose Hashem and Hashem chose the Yidden. Okay, and therefore he brought this carbon, so on and so forth. That was one prat of the Medrash. So the Rebbe asks, L'cha'era, Bechira can only be when two things are equal. When both things are equal, then you can pick one over the next. If they're different, you can't use the word Bechira Chavshis, free choice. So L'cha'era, how does it mean Hashem? The Jews chose Hashem to be their God. There's no comparison, obviously, Chas v'shalom, to say that. So how is it shaykh even the word Bechira to choose on Hashem? Secondly, Hashem chose the Yidden. So l'chayra, how can Hashem choose the Yidden? They're different than Goyim. The bottom line is, what do you mean Bechira? So yesterday we discussed what the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya, that the Bechira tak is not on the neshama of the Jew, but it's stuck on the goof of the Jew. And what the Rebbe says, but l'chayra, that's not negayah to that Kodesh Baruch Hu, because as far as Hashem is concerned, even the goof of a Jew is different than the goof of a Goy. So then he quoted another medrash, and the pasuk Chelki Hashem Amra Nafshi. The medrash says like this: there's a mashal of a king that came into a country, and he came with all his entourage. And this person says, I want this duke, and this guy says, I want this duke, and this guy says, I want this noble. There's a pikach echad, and said, no nasid malka. I only want the king. I don't want any of this sidekicks over there. I want the king himself. So the Rebbe asks, why do you need a pikach to know that the king is different? But the Medrash adds another word, because kulam is chalfen, everybody can be exchanged except the king. Because even on the chessboard we mentioned yesterday, the only thing that the pawn cannot become is a king, because it's only echad. Echad ain't sheni. So why do you need a pikach to do this? Okay, so now the Alter Rebbe started going into a different thing, and he started saying like this: how is it shaykh that the earlier generations were Eved Avodah Zarah? So we learned the Rambam at the beginning of Chas Avodah Zarah. Taka discusses this. He said, where did the concept of Avodah Zarah come into the world? So he says that Enosh and that generation, so they had a concept, not Chas v'shalom, they didn't worship Hashem. But at the beginning it started off by saying, listen, the sun produces, the moon produces, we get things, there's the mazolos, the kechavim give it. It's only right we should give thanks to them. And eventually led, he gave thanks, instead that was more tangible, so he started worshipping them instead of Hashem. Okay, so he said, so what was their chet? Aveir was that they gave credence to it, meaning they didn't realize that all the kechavim mazolas, all the constellations and all these things that sustain the world are only kagazim yarachesed, like the axe in the hand of the chopper. You don't give thank you to the axe, because the axe doesn't have bechira to do it or not to do it. So the ikar point is, and this by the way is a whole machlekes we learned already, in Rishonim, if there's shitav by goyim or not. But the bottom line is, according to Torah, there is only Hashem. There are no other deizogers, opinion people that could say the sun has an opinion to shine or not to shine, or the moon has this. It's only kagazim yadachaytziv. It's not even the way of what the Gemara says, chamin el marish to go through the shakya, that you the waiter pours you the wine, and you say thank you to the waiter, but it's not even his wine. Okay, that's what we're up to now. Okay, so he says, V'gam lefi, 10 lines in the end of the page, of Kuf. V'gam lefi to usim, even according to the mistakes of those people, Shakechov mazal sim bali bechira, that they have free choice. That's why Choshu, they thought, Shayidei sheyavdo esam, that through this, that they'll worship them, so what will happen? They'll get more. They'll get more sustenance. From Through that, they came even to a bigger mistake. That Hashem, on the contrary, Hashem checked out of the world. Like they maintained the pasuk Rama Kol Goyim Havaya, that Hashem Tak is removed from the world. Okay, that's what they eventually came to this big mistake, that not only the Ika thing comes from Hashem, we have to thank them also, but then they realize Hashem's not here, and everything, they're controlling everything. The marshal of the king that appointed officers to run the country. The king is not there. The king's in the palace. The king is removed from the nation. Yeah, and he appointed officers. Hashem left the world, and he appointed the Chavim Mazolos. Even though they're clear that they had to run the country. Because the king appointed them, like the guy that says, I'm the boss in my house because my wife's told me so. After they did appoint them, that the king Bachal doesn't even mix in, only distant, once in a blue moon, the king makes himself noticeable. And he said, this that the Gemara says at the Goyim call Hashem Elokod Elokaya, meaning Hashem is God Taka, but there are other gods too. He is the God of the gods. He said Nechlol and Bezeshnei Sugim includes two categories of this. Number one, Shegam Elu Shacheshim Sha'azav Hashem Etzor B'dei Kechovim Mazolis Keireneitzi B'Shem Elokod Elokaya, that even those opinions that say Hashem left the world, right? So they hold Hashem is the Elokod Elokaya. He's still the boss. He's still the king. In addition to the fact that Hashem is higher than the officers that he appointed, our gods, Ledaitam. According to their opinion, they also are gods. Okay? It's also not because of the officers themselves. Okay? So one opinion is Al-Qad al-Akai means, yeah, Hashem left, but he's still king, he still appointed them, and this that they are governing the world is because Hashem appointed them. By the way, the whole concept, the Rebbe writes here, Ladaitam, it's interesting because what's Pshat Elokim Acherim? Elokim Acherim cannot mean other gods. No, I'm saying Elokim Acherim cannot mean other gods. Rashi in Chumash says Elokim Acherim means that Acherim call them Elokim. Rashi says clearly in Chumash, Elokim Acherim doesn't mean other gods, because how can Torah say there are other gods? There are no other gods. Ein Eid Mulvade. Elokim Acherim means other people call them Elokim. One second. Uliidach, Gamator shehi Ashefa shenishma Kosh Baruch Hu b'chirosim b'chlal b'dakus is Elokod Elokaya. Because the fact that they are able to do, that they have free choice to be mashpia or not, yeah, granted that Hashem gave them that power. Who inyan shel shlita is still an inyan of control, which is Elokaya. Okay? In other words, it's like you have in a company, you have the boss, and the boss gives over power to the manager to make decisions. Or sometimes the manager even gives it over to the workers to make decisions, yet to a certain extent. So yeah, granted that it's only because the boss gave them that ability. But the bottom line is they have a say in the matter. And he said, "V'shlilus inyan elokim acherim b'tachlis is davka yidei is only through knowing shekol hamamutzoyim And they have no daya whatsoever. They have no opinion whatsoever. They are only a robot, the axe in the hand of the chopper. Because Rebbe, this is all to the answer the Rebbe asked the question. What's the pikchus of the pikeach that said, "I'm not Nasiv Malka"? Why would anybody want anybody but the king? Even a kid knows that a king is a king. He says, here you could say this is the pikchus. To understand that the king doesn't give any power to anybody. It's only the king and nobody else exists. He says, and the nimshol, there's what? This, that the Yid know the emes. That all the intermediaries that hashpah comes from, that takes seichel to understand that the sun and the moon, who give a lot of sustenance to the world, or the kachav mazolos, whatever, have no say. That takes pikches. In other words, you could say l'chayra that the mashal is that the pikech came and said, "I'm not Nasiv Malka," meaning I understand that nobody else exists but the king. On his own. That was his unique. 3-year-olds then were pretty smart. Rivka got married at 3, that means she came to the well at 3 and all that, yeah. In those generations, not now. Shem Roy, that's a pnimius, because they see that's the pikach. Pikchus, the greatness is that they understand that the king is the king and that's it. Nobody else exists. Because they're their mile is that they might be able to think that they're Mitzrayim. So the Rebbe's answer, meanwhile, but the Rebbe's going to say it's not a good answer. But the answer is because the pictures of the guy that the Pekah said not Nasiv Malka is because he realizes that only the king exists, and that takes because the fact that the Shemesh, in other words, the fact that the king gave the dukes and the nobles power is because they're really fit to be a leader. Because he didn't take a yokel, he took dukes and nobles. So that would be the showing that they're really worthy of it. Nevertheless, you understand that there is nothing. It's only Malka.
It has to be Sechel of Kedusha, right? There are people in Sechel of Kripa, they're brilliant, but they don't.
This pikach in the mashal is not a pikach of Torah.
Any Sechel?
Okay, let's see how the Rebbe refutes this. The fact that the Melech, the Medrash brings the mashal from the king and the officers, the fact is, the nobles have bechira, right? They can do what they want. When this guy comes along and says, I picked this duke, the fact that the duke has bechira, so that makes sense to say by him praising the duke, he'll get more from the duke. In other words, the mashal of the Medrash is saying that the duchsin have bechira. And therefore there's a logic to say in the Medrash that I should praise them, because then I'll get more from them. But in the Nimshal it doesn't make sense. He said, moving, the Shapikach Amar Nasiv Malka, Mibnei Shavedes HaMelech Shuva Etzel Yosef Meite'eles Vashpa Shia De Sodom. In other words, like this, So what's the pikach? You know, the regular guys are coming and says, "Ananas duchsin," right? I want the duchsin. That's because he understands. It's also a chachma. He understands that they have choice, free choice, and therefore, if I praise the senator, I'll get more for my city, whatever. Yeah. But the pearl, so then what's the pikach of the pikeach? That he understands that being with the melech is better outcome than the teitzah, than the outcome of them getting something from the duchsin. L'chein, if you think about it, there's a pikach to think I should praise the noble. Why? If I praise the king, I'm not going to get anything. The king is remote from the country. If I praise the guy that's my city official, then I'm going to get something from him because he has free choice.
But there shouldn't be any comparison
Between what and what?
between Hashem and the senator.
Correct. But we're talking about the marshal.
Yes.
The Pikeach understood that just serving the king is worth more than anything you're going to get by praising the senators.
Yeah.
Even though you might not get anything from the king. I'll give you a simple example. A guy is going to ask for a raise, right? So he comes to his boss and starts praising him. Yeah? Is that Avodah Zarah?
No.
No, why not? If you think about it, the parnasa comes from Hashem. So by me praising the boss, I'm expecting to get more. That means I believe that he has a say in the matter. So it should be Avodah Zarah.
You could be a channel.
Huh?
You could be a channel from Hashem.
But the fact that I'm praising him is because he has bechira. If I know the boss has no bechira whatsoever, why am I praising him?
Yeah, of course.
Need to be continued.
Bye.